Good evening, one and all. Uh, my name is Dr. Sangeeta Kale. I work as the Dean and a Professor in Defense Institute of Advanced Technology, and I also work as a member of Pune International Center. So on behalf of Pune International Center, I welcome all of you on the dais and off the dais for this particular program. Let me start first by saying as to what PIC is all about, what is the role of PIC. Secondly, I'll just talk about what is this particular vertical which is called as Crazy About Science and Technology. And then we move to the actual program, that is a book release of one of the eminent writers from Pune and also India. So basically, Pune International Center, it's a think tank. It is nothing but a group of people together, eminent personalities from different parts of profession, right from arts, culture, science, technology, and so on. They've got together and made this particular kind of a consortium, which is called as Pune International Center. This particular PIC conducts, these are around 300 odd people which makes up Pune International Center. And we conduct different lecture series, we conduct different seminars, different debates and discussion forums of different people on current issues, on the issues which are pertaining also to history, also to geology, geography, also from arts and culture, and of course science and technology. This particular PIC has been initiated or started by some visionaries who belong to Pune, such as Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Amitav Malik, Admiral Bhushan Gokhale, KPIT Systems, Dr. Ravi Pandey, and so on. So these are the visionaries who have brought together the platform of PIC together. Under this, we also write policy papers which are written as some kind of a guidelines for the government, and these are also published at different forums so that helps the government to steer some kind of a decision process. Under these activities, this is one of the verticals called as Crazy About Science and Technology. This is a new vertical which has started mainly for the students and the younger generation, and it is kept as an open forum for all the students, and that is why we take it either in COEP or we take it in ICER. The initial 2 lectures is a new activity which brings about different kind of science and technology lectures for the younger generation, mainly for the students, so that we are able to guide them to choose the career, to go ahead in their career perspectives, so that they are able to interact with visionaries in Pune, outside Pune, within India and outside India. Initial set of 2 lectures we have already had under this particular vertical. One was by Dr. Pramod Kale, who was the director of ISRO. So we conducted that particular lecture in ICER, Pune. Then we had a lecture by Dr. Dhurandhar from on space technologies. That was also in ICER, and this particular first interaction we are having under this particular umbrella in COEP. So this is about the vertical that we have about Crazy About Science and Technology. Today we have gathered here to basically have a book release of the book entitled eVolution, Decoding India's Disruptive Tech Story. This is written by Mr. Kiran Karnik, who is a noted personality in Pune and also in the country. So before we get started, I will just introduce you to the chairperson of today's program, Dr. Anand Deshpande. Dr. Anand Deshpande is the founder, chairman, and managing director of Persistent Systems. He is responsible for overall leadership strategy and management of the company. He has told me to keep his introduction very, very small. Therefore, I have a very good introduction of him, but he has told me to keep it very short. So I have Dr. Anand Deshpande with me. I will request him to introduce the chief guest today, and then we will have the release of the book.
Good evening, all of you. It's my pleasure to introduce Padma Shri Kiran Karnik to this audience. I'm sure he's quite well known, but I'll give a brief introduction about Kiran so that, for this audience and many of the students who are here. So I've had a good fortune of knowing Kiran for almost um, 18, 19 years now, ever since he took on the NASSCOM role, and he has been a mentor to me as well. So I am really delighted to have this opportunity to introduce him. Kiran is a undergrad in physics and an IIM Ahmedabad alumni. He started his career with ISRO, and then from space he moved to broadcasting, where he was the chief when he brought Discovery Channel and Animal Planet to India. In 2001, he took over from Devang Mehta after his death as the president of NASSCOM at a time when the industry was in a little bit of a, I wouldn't say crisis, but in a turmoil. But over the next few years, he really got the industry together, and much of the growth during the period in the early 2000s was led by NASSCOM and his initiatives at NASSCOM. So the work that he did out there as being a member of the software industry, I can vouch for, were very significant contributions that got made while he was the president of NASSCOM. After his term as NASSCOM, one other important thing that he did was he was appointed by the government as the chairman of Satyam at the time when Satyam was in crisis. He really saved the company. Not only did he save the company, he also saved India's reputation, because Satyam had become really is an issue as far as our reputation was concerned. Thousands of jobs got saved, and the way the whole Satyam issue was managed by him and the board that got appointed was quite exemplary. I don't believe something like that has happened before or after. I've had the good fortune of being part of a committee that he leads, where he is the chairman of IIIT Delhi. So where he has taken an institution that started ground up, and today it's one of the premier technology and IT institutions in the country. And his leadership at the institute has been very much responsible for taking the institute to the next level. He's been on many boards, but most significantly, he's a director at the Reserve Bank of India, and he lives in Delhi but has a home in Pune. One of the objectives that we all have in Pune is that we want to convince him that Pune is actually a much better place to live, okay? And he should live here and have a home in Delhi, okay? So that's really our objective, and we are delighted to have you here at PIC. Now, Kiran does many things, and he writes books also, right? So today we are going to do a Pune launch of his book on disruption and technology. And I invite you all to buy these books. They are outside. Authors like books being bought, and he will sign them for you at the end of the show. So with this introduction, let me invite him to show us the book and share a few thoughts on how the book got written and what went into it. Thank you.
We have with us Mr. Pradeep Bhargava, President of MCCI. I request him also to come for the book launch.
Dr. Deshpande, Professor Kave, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here, and thank you very much, Anand, for that very kind introduction. As I like to say on such occasions, this is a nice place because people say nice things about you and they tell the truth. And all of you know Anand, he always tells the truth. So please believe everything he said, all the nice things in particular. But thank you, Anand. I've known Anand for a long time and greatly respect the work that he's done, where he's taken his company, how he's built it up. An entrepreneur who's exemplary in the IT industry, not just for his business sense and acumen and where the company is, but particularly, at least for me, that's more important, is the way he's done it and the human touch that he brings. Many of you would know about Persistent Systems as a company. I don't know how many of you know about his foundation and the work that he does, and his personal contribution to that. It's phenomenal. And my respect for him is more than doubled by what he does there as compared to the pure business one, which is great, but that's different, Anand. So he'll continue to do well there. But thank you, Anand. And a pleasure to have Anand chair this session this afternoon. Happy to be in Pune. I am what you might call a PRP, a partially resident Punekar. So I'm not Not all that offshore. I spend a little more time here, Anand, but I hope to spend more time. Always a pleasure to be in this city, and a city that takes a lot of interest in discussions, dialogue, art, and culture. So that's nice. So this afternoon, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the book for those of you who have an interest in knowing what it's about. So I'll just touch on what the book has in it very briefly, and then I'm going to leave it to Anand to take it from there on, and we will make sure we have enough time for questions from all of you, so we have some discussion and interaction. So I'll be brief and just tell you what the book covers in a broad sense. This book is not, first let me say, an academic treatise. So it's not intended to delve into great depth on any particular subject, nor is it a history of technology, from how technology has developed and where it's gone. It's in many ways a personal experience of how I, and indeed people from my generation, have experienced technology in India, in the Indian context. And in parallel with that, how we have seen society change. And the two have influenced each other very clearly, and that's something my book reflects. How technology has influenced society and how it's shaped. And in turn, how society, social norms and cultures have had an impact on how technology is used, if not developed. That's the theme of the book. And I picked first three main areas in which life is affected for each and every one of us. Education, health, and the whole business of money, which is banking and finance and so on. It's the core of what affects all of us and how technology has changed that. Then there's something which I find very, very interesting, which is how technology has affected ABC. And ABC is attitudes, behavior, and culture. And this, when I look at where I was at the age students who are here are, I see the tremendous change between how one behaved, what kind of cultural ethos was there, and what the attitudes were. And it intrigues me to see how much of that is because of technology and how much is just evolution for other factors. So that's something I've touched on. Then there's a little bit about use of technology for what was popularly called soft power now. How does technology help the soft power of a nation? Your cultural exports, what you do, and how does technology influence that in terms of creating an image, a certain brand, you might say, for a country in the world outside. The last part of the book really deals with something which I find tremendously interesting, and I've had the very good fortune of being in those three specific areas in which India can claim with some justification to have done very well in technology. These are atomic energy, space, and IT. And I think most of you, if not all of you, will agree that these have been in the technology space India's flag bearers in the globe. And the world outside recognizes us for achievements in these three areas, where we are among the top 3, 4, 5 nations in many of these areas. And what I've tried to do there is to see, again, from the experiences that I have had, what are the policy elements, what are the ecosystem features, what is it and how is it that we succeeded in these three areas more than others. And I've not looked at failures and not tried to compare why it didn't work out elsewhere, but just picking from these three areas, what were the elements in these three areas that made us achieve success? And then looking ahead, when you look at these three areas and try to distill out what were the policies, the regulations, the structuring, the organizations that drove these forward, what can we learn from these as we move to the next, you might say, or next orbit of technology in newer areas, be it genetics or biology or materials or artificial intelligence, data analytics, any of these areas. What are the broad lessons one can draw, and what should be done by industry, by the government in these areas? Now, as I've looked at these areas, particularly areas like health and education, I've also, let my mind run free on the speculative aspect of where these might be. As I said, a large part of it is the change we have seen in our lifetime, and the young would find it very routine. Those of you from my generation would have some nostalgia as you read some of this. For example, going to your bank and wanting to withdraw your own money, and you go there and you're given a thing, a token, a coin with a number on it, and you sit there and wait for the number to be called out, and of course you wait, and then cups of tea are had behind the counter, and some conversation take place, and you get impatient and you're waiting, and then finally your number is called and you're thrilled, you go there and collect your money. But remember, you could do all this, and as I said, I see a lot of older people here, you would recall, so I'm just stimulating your memory again. You would recall that you had to go to your own bank, to your own branch, between what are called banking hours, which is maybe 10 to 2, on 6 days a week, on 2 weeks in the month, and 5 days a week on the remaining 2 weeks. And if it was a public holiday, forget your money, you've got to plan in advance and get your money out. Today, of course, the young people I know have gone to the bank, if at all, only to open their account. After that, they've never seen their bank branch. They've gone to some ATM, withdrawn money, and that's it. That story is over. Rest of it is done online. So to me, this transformation is fantastic. The fact that you can sit at home 24/7 and transfer money from here to there, or that you can go to an ATM anywhere in the country at any time of the day or night and get your money out. For most of us, including for people in our generation, this has now become routine. But just think back to the change that it has brought about in that one area. That's just one of the many examples you can pick of where we have changed. The other one may be in the health area, and I want to touch on this for a moment too, that when I was growing up, the additions to when you had problems in your health, the additions to your body functions were something you added on. I mean, spectacles, something you put on. Or if you had a serious tooth problem or by getting old, you had dentures, which were separate and fixed on because your teeth fell off or whatever had a problem. And then it evolved to the point where the spectacles became contact lenses, which you could put in. And the hearing aids, which were outside, external, sometimes were replaced, and much more in recent years now, by cochlear implants, which are implants. The teeth, instead of dentures, became teeth implants. So if you go now and get a tooth removed, the doctor will offer to implant a new tooth in. So these became implants, and these implants now have grown into all kinds of areas. If you have a knee problem, and some of you may have gone through it, you get a knee replacement. And very soon, if you think ahead, and I'm jumping ahead, we can talk of this a little more, you'll begin to get a lot more of these substitutions through things like stem cell research, where you can grow organs through stem cells, or through electromechanical devices like the heart pacemaker, which are not biological but which are implanted in. And this can go on and on further and further, and imagine what it can lead to. And now I'm jumping from where we were and what we have seen to the future, which, who knows, maybe not too far, it may be 10 years, 20 years, where every body part can be replaced. Every body part. So what will wear out? Nothing at all. So if nothing wears out, you continue living. For how long? Who knows? As technology gets better, you live forever. So just hold that thought for a moment. The same way with your brain. Today, especially people like me, or at least I wouldn't say people like me, often forget things. You forget names and faces, and you forget various things. So all you need is, like you do to your telephone and on your mobile, add an SD card. Just put in a little chip in your head, which stores memories. And as that gets more sophisticated, it will link up with your brain, and memories can be stored, and more memories can be stored. And maybe all memories can be stored. And there will be a time when all your memories will be stored, which may sound good, but to me it's a bit scary, because you'll forget nothing. Now, do you really want to remember everything that happened to you from when you were a young child to wherever you are now? I'm not so sure. So I think these are where you might head as you go ahead. One last part of the future, and then I think I'll stop there and hand over to Anand. Technology has created all these wonders, but it's also created problems. The two most visible and known ones, which threaten not just us as individuals or as a group or a country, but indeed the whole human species, you might say. The first is nuclear war. You might have some terrible nuclear war which devastates the planet, makes it radioactive, and if it's on the scale that could happen, the whole earth may become radioactive and unlivable by and large, caused by technology. The second is climate change. We all know about global warming, driven by industrialization, by carbon that we generate through all our processes from driving to industry, and it's raising the temperature. And you might possibly, at some point of time, unless we take care, have a runaway effect where the temperature rises, and because it rises, you get more and more carbon, more and more heat settling in, and it becomes irreversible. And again, the earth will become unlivable for human beings. So technology causes these kinds of problems. But it also offers solutions. Take climate change. The solution seems to be technological. The fact that you can either sequesterize carbon or reduce emissions before that, or do something else where you have a low carbon economy and the carbon is taken care of in some ways. You can try and control climate change in other ways. This is one kind of solution. Nuclear war, much more difficult. It's all in here rather than on weapons. But who knows, technology may offer solutions there too. But the ultimate solution for the ultimate problem in both areas is something else. And that may be that, just as people in the old days moved from inhospitable areas to other areas when weather changed or something happened, and we know of the Indus Valley civilization and so on, maybe the whole human species, at least some parts of it, may migrate out somewhere in space, maybe to the moon, maybe a base somewhere else. And this may be not by choice, it may become a necessity. If we know an asteroid is going to strike us and destroy the Earth, put it off course altogether, maybe you've got to have an escape plan. And one escape plan may be for technology to hit that asteroid before it hits Earth. The other one may be for us to get out. And an interim solution may be something else, and that you learn from what countries, particularly in the developed world, have done. When they started getting polluting industries, they did a fairly simple thing. They improved some technologies, made them less polluting, but they did something simpler. They moved all the industries to the less developed countries. So your major manufacturing bases, China being the biggest, or you have India to a smaller scale, maybe Vietnam, and they moved all their dirty industries to these countries, and they live a nice, clean place. So if you look at UK today, compared to where it was 50, 60 years ago, pollution levels are so low, it's just fantastic. But it's thanks to their sending stuff, exporting all the bad stuff. So maybe we can do the same as a global community, not as a country. Maybe instead of humans migrating, you might send all the polluting industries out into space. And the Earth can become a nice, clean dormitory planet where it's clean and nice and safe, no pollution, no bad air. And this particularly strikes me and spend some time from it because, as Anand mentioned, I spend much of my time yet in Delhi, which is among the worst places on the globe in terms of pollution. So I'm very taken with these solutions. Maybe we'll export all our industry and things from Delhi, maybe, and cars will become cleaner, so it will get cleaner air. Lots more, but I'll stop here and let's take off from there. Anand?
Kiran thought it would be a good idea if he had an interactive session and had a Q&A to get going. So instead of his giving a presentation, he thought it would be a good idea to open it out. So what I'm planning to do is I have a small set of questions which are sort of segmented and we'll get them going. And I don't want to do Q&A at the end, but I want to sort of allow you to ask questions as you go along. It's a nice, small enough room that we can easily do this. So if you feel there is something you want to add to this part of it, please raise your hand and we'll try to manage them as we go along. You need, okay, fine. All right, so we'll use this. So, you've talked about many things in the book, and what is actually always fun is to talk about the future more than the past because you can say what you want. So what I was trying to ask you in this context is that you've written a lot about technology, and from your point of view, what are the few technologies that you think are really the ones that are going to be very important in the next few years? And where do you think are, what would be in your point? You talked about atomic energy, space, and IT for the last 25, 30, 40 years. What do you think are the next 20 years? What do you see as the top things to come?
Well, as you rightly said, Anand, you can speculate about the future with no possibility of being proven wrong just now. So let me try that. No, I think if I take a shorter term first, it's going to be technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, and data analytics, which are going to drive a lot of things. And again, I look at it not just from the point of view of what they may do to industry and efficiency and new products and services, but also their societal impact, because they are likely, at least in the short term, to create difficulties and disruptions in the job market. Certainly disruptions. I'm more optimistic in the medium to long term. I think new technologies create altogether new jobs. In the short term, a lot of pain, a lot of redeployment, a lot of changes. But as I look ahead a little beyond the 5 to 10 year time frame, maybe even that time frame, one of the most exciting things are going to be in the biology genetics area. Already the kind of work that's happening with gene editing and what you can do is both phenomenally exciting and also very scary. I talked of some of the other scary ones. And here you can edit genes and do something to them, you don't know. I just reading in today's newspaper, which many of you may have seen, that the DNA from the shark may have things for curing cancer. So ideally, in some point in future, you may pick that DNA strand and edit it into the human DNA, so no future generations have at least that type of cancer. But you can do other things which create altogether new things, new problems, maybe new species which don't exist, which is somewhat scary.
See, I'm going to sort of look at you. If you feel like there is something that you want to say, please raise your hand. We will include you. Go ahead, Sanjay. Actually, try to ask a question without the mic. Let's see. Can we hear it?
I think it's recorded, so it's being recorded. Just a follow-up to Anand's question. So you have been associated with 2 of the 3 success stories of India, which is with space and with IT. And you very briefly mentioned that those 3 areas have done so well. My question is, what was it in those 3 areas that we need to be aware of as a success factor to bring into the next 3 that we just touched upon?
Actually, you will answer this question, but I'm trying to follow a script, okay? So don't derail my script a whole lot. So on my script, if you have something specific in this context, it will be good. But let's get your question here answered here.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Anand. This one I will do. A small additional point which I take some pride in. I started my career in atomic energy. So, absolutely. No, to your point, I think, you can pick out many smaller points. But to me, at the very broad level, there were 2 or 3 things which drove success in these areas. The first and most important was human resource, the human capital, in all 3 areas. And quickly, very briefly, if you look at atomic energy, Dr. Bhabha started the whole concept at the IISc in Bangalore and then moved to Tata Institute, first there and then in Bombay. And he was very clear, if you read some of the things he's written, that his intention at that time was to build the human capital base. And then he went on to R&D and did other things. Pretty much the same in space. Many of our initial efforts were really based at building up the human capabilities, and we had the good fortune of being able to send at least a few people to space agencies outside the country to understand and so on. In the case of IT, as much or more than this, it was the human capital base. In that case, by and large in the country, building on the base that had been set, which is why I often credit the government. Most people say the IT industry grew despite the government, or when the government was sleeping or didn't know. And the 2 areas, as the Minister Pramod Mahajan used to famously say, the 2 areas in which India has been most successful is because we had no ministry for them, which was Ministry of Beauty and Ministry of IT. At that time, we won a lot of beauty awards. And, almost ironically, he was the first IT minister himself. So, anyway, I think the important thing is the base that was built up through the public sector areas in electronics in places like ITI, BL, HAL, and then it took off from there. And the big thing in the 90s was education expansion, some of it of rather poor quality, but all the same the numbers grew. So it was that as number 1. Number 2 was a focus on mission, very clear objectives, a very tight focus. And third, very important to me, which I've referred to in many places, maybe my MBA hat trying to justify itself, but I've seen time and again that it's organization and management that is as important. So you have the wherewithal, you have the capability, you have the people, you have the technology, but can you implement, can you put it to work, can you actually execute something? And that depends on how you organize and your organization and managerial capabilities, which is why many of the other programs of the government have not worked. It's not because they're bureaucratic, it's not because it's government. After all, atomic energy and space are both completely government. But it's only because they were organized and managed in a different way by professionals.
So let me ask you further along those few areas that you pointed out, AI, robotics, data analytics, and then biology and genetics. When you look at, and you pointed out the 3 areas which have had impact, what do you think is technology going to create as an impact for India? Or what areas do we think we need to be, things like education and health, and you have talked about some of those. How do you see technology having an impact on India as such in some of these areas and addressing our problems?
I think the 2 areas that excite me the most among these, you can pick any of them and all of them will be there, but education and health. And if you look at education, one is something which is just outreach, which again, I was involved with almost 45 years ago, using satellites to take education to remote parts in remote rural areas in India. The capability to just deliver good, high quality education around the country. It's not been as successful as one had hoped it would be for a variety of reasons, but that potential yet exists. with broadband now going out, it becomes interactive. It's no longer one way like television, which was one constraint. It's now interactive. You can get a lot more things going. In education, there are lots of other things that can be and will be done through technology, which I find very, very good. And already some private players are doing a lot of it, most of it in the coaching, academic area. But I think they're setting the pattern of how you can begin to use technology to really create an impact. The other one is health. And in health, it's not just about, what you do on the biology, healthcare front. It's also diagnostics, small boxes where you can, diagnose 20 different critical ailments which are prevalent in India, be it malaria or TB or things like that, which are common and neglected. And more you're going to get those kind of abilities, or the fact that you have at the other extreme of somewhat sophistication, you might say, a wearable which you just put on, like you use today, starting from the basics of counting steps, to something else that monitors your bodily function and looks at it. And that combined with big data, which is where data analytics comes in, which analyzes data from millions or tens of millions of such people and then does predictive healthcare. It says that, look, if these are the kinds of things that you have, then the probability of your having this problem or doing something is so high. So either go to a doctor or take something. So I think this combination of some of these areas of the data analytics which comes from IT to some of the health-related things that come from biology, where from a sweat or a tear or just your pulse rate, you're able to diagnose many, many different things. Those are going to be very exciting technologies for the future. And none of these are, some distant future. All these are practically there in the lab, and you know this best. It's really a question of rolling them out, making them commercially viable, or making them viable from some other subsidized means. But education and health, I see huge transformations coming and big possibilities if we can get it right.
So you alluded to some of the opportunities in healthcare where data can be collected and interesting things can be done and new diagnostics can happen. I'd like to take you to a slightly different tangent on that with regarding privacy, and more specifically around Aadhaar and India Stack. So, clearly there is a lot of technology in Aadhaar and then India Stack that was getting built out. But for various reasons, including Supreme Court and other issues, we are sort of stranded, perhaps 2 steps back on that. What do you think is the option that you think that will our wise people allow us to do this data for better good in the context of healthcare? And what's your comment on what's the future of Aadhaar and where does India Stack go and what happens to payments? So if you can comment a bit on that.
Sure. This one is a bit tricky for me personally, Anand, because I'm somewhat, in my own mind, I don't have a full congruence. I remember when this first started, talking to Nandan and telling him, Nandan, what about concerns about privacy and so on? So, of course, at that point of time, I think he's moved on a lot. He says, look, I'm doing this other thing. My job is to ensure the technology works, that it's secure, safe, and as hacker-proof as possible. And he's delivered on that. He says other concerns are for other people and privacy and what happens to data and that kind of thing. And then somebody else, and I was greatly concerned seeing this data floating around, individuals steal it, hack in, the governments, and this worries me at what happens to surveillance. But somebody else pointed out to me, which I think has a strong element of truth in it, that it's fine for you guys sitting in middle class, upper middle class places to worry about concepts like privacy. Take this poor person out in the field. He has no identity. And worse, she has absolutely no identity. And if she wants to open anything from a bank account to establish ownership of a bit of land or to go and get credit, there's just no way because she has zero identity. She doesn't have a ration card, doesn't have any kind of proof of identity, doesn't have a proof of residence because it may be, as I remember telling again Nandan this, that the address may be, pipeline number 2 on the Western Expressway in Bombay, where they have these huge water pipes stacked on the side of the road. They live there. People actually live there. So what address, what address proof are you asking for? And you have all these standard address proof things saying, utility bill, telephone bill. I mean, how many people in our country have utility bills and telephone bills when they're poor people on a migrant labor basis? And then it struck me, yes, that Aadhaar, if you can somehow get an Aadhaar to them on the basis primarily of biometrics and iris, and not insist too much on residence, even with some certification now they've insisted from Gram Panchayat or something, then they have the possibility of opening a bank account, and from the bank account can stem credit, and from credit can stem better livelihoods, and then the whole chain multiplies. And that takes us to what you said is the India Stack, which is the concept, saying if you can digitize some elements of payments, then you have a paperless, anytime, anywhere kind of system where you can either get bank credit, build in financial inclusion, and do a great deal. So I see a lot of advantages in the whole Aadhaar scheme. The concern is that, like in many other things, that while the prospects are excellent, we don't take care of 2 or 3 collaterals. One collateral is that 0.01% person whose fingerprint is not clear because of manual labor and gets washed off, and it doesn't show up properly every time you do an Aadhaar identification. So the person has an Aadhaar, goes to a ration shop, they have this biometric thing to prove identity, and it doesn't work. And so the person is deprived of something. And it's a very, very small percentage, but when you have 1.3 billion people, 1% of that or 0.1% of that is a massive number. That's worrisome. The second one is the collateral of, if all this data is being collected and everything is linked to Aadhaar, your bank account, your phone, your voter ID, your credit card, everything else, then somebody who has access to all this data and puts it together knows you inside out, knows you better than your family or your best friend, because they know every moment where you spent money, how you spent it, what you bought, where you went, how much is in your bank balance, everything possible. And is that good or bad again? I mean, a lot of people justify it around the world saying this builds security and safety, and if you have nothing to hide, why do you worry? But as I said, that's why I'm conflicted, because I'm not sure I want to live in a world where someone whom I don't even know in a government office, or in some ways worse, some private monopoly, a mega Amazon or a mega Walmart, knows more about me than possibly I know myself.
Kiran, I think you're more of an optimist and I'm a pessimist. So that's where our 2 points of view would diverge. But what I want to say is that while a technological fix is possible for some of these problems, some of the issues at the bottom are not technological, particularly the inequity and the say exists. It's great. A person doesn't have an identity. You and I know how difficult it is to get a ration card if you don't have an identity. So you may be able to solve the problem. But why does he not have an identity? That is a social and a political issue. The other thing that scares me, while big data and data mining is all good, someone recently said information is the new oil. And that is very, very scary. Because if one agency manages to dominate and collect all this information, it's not the middle class privacy that we're concerned about, but the misuse and the distortions that can take place can be very, very high. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep. And as you said, I am an optimist, and I don't think you're a pessimist, but I take your point. But surprisingly, I completely agree with you, because I say that the technology is not a magic bullet. Our problems are far deeper, and particularly the problems of inequity in our society are phenomenal. And my worry, which I painted a somewhat rosy picture on the health and what might happen, my worry is that some of these, in fact maybe many of them, will in fact raise inequity. And let me give you one example, and Anand, if I may take a minute or two on this one, because it pertains to some of the stuff which I've put indirectly in the book. I talked about chip being implanted and so on, and so you just project that forward, and not that far forward, I think it's 5 years or 10 years from now, you can enhance maybe your bodily capability as already you do with like prosthetic hands. You have more power than your normal human hands. You have brains with something implanted which gives you more capability, maybe just an additional memory. Now what's going to happen? This might sound nice at some point, I'm not so sure. It might sound nice, but for all humans to have more capability. But look what will happen at least for the first many years, and maybe for a long, long time, because these are expensive, they will be first used by those who have affordability to do that. And therefore, while many of us, particularly those of us from the IT industry, often take pride in saying that one thing the IT industry did in India is to make it possible for middle class people, or even not even middle class people, with a bright idea to do well, to do some good things, and also make some money. And so the smart could become rich in a positive sense. I don't mean just becoming filthy rich, smart could become rich. But if you look at the kind of things that you can do, possibly with a brain implant of some kind, you will have the rich becoming smarter, just because they are rich. And you do two things. One, it's going to increase the inequity in society. Second, if you then project that to what I mentioned earlier, things like genetic engineering and designer babies, again, not wild science fiction. You can have a baby with the way you want, the features you want, you can play around with the DNA. So you get a new caste system of people who have the affordability to be smart, look, whatever is the definition of look good. They may be superhumans in all senses. And so you begin to get this division in society. And the solution to me is not either to bar that technology or to put regulations too tightly around it, but to change our social construct, the social model, to some point where this can't and doesn't happen. How to do it, I have no easy answer. But you're right, this again gets you back to the issue being one of social issues and the economic model rather than pure technology, which is neither a complete solution nor is it necessarily going to solve the problems which we face today in our society, much of which relate to things like inequity.
So this is about relationship between the disruptive technologies and the jobless growth. So much gets talked about it, isn't it? It's actually a question in two parts and to both of you, both Dr. Deshpande and Mr. Karnik. What is happening because of these disruptive technologies on the joblessness or jobless growth, not just joblessness, jobless growth part of it? What is happening here and now in these months and these quarters? And then the last part of it is what would happen 5, 10, 20 years? What's the narrative that you subscribe to?
Yeah, let me amplify that question and then give it back to you. No, I'll let you answer it. So clearly, see, if you look at automation right now, and that's really the way it's going to happen, automation is going to create prosperity for sure, but it'll be at the expense of jobs. So wouldn't this create wider disparity of wealth and hence also create it'd be harder to find jobs and job market would be challenged, right? So what would be your thoughts on that? I'll give you a comment after that.
Okay. Fine. And my optimism, which Pradeep referred to, really comes from taking a longer term perspective on this. And if you look at the long term perspective, every time a new technology has come, it's created tremendous disruptions, but the overall jobs have increased. And the simplest, somewhat crude example I give is that when the automobiles first came on, all the horse carriages and or bailgadis, many of them had to go away, and those people who looked after them, the people who drove them, lost jobs, and they didn't become car drivers, somebody else became. But if you look at the automobile industry today globally, it's among the biggest employers in the world. More recent context, and in India, I yet remember the time from my time where the banks and the bank employees associations were opposing computerization in the 70s very strongly because they felt job loss, not other reasons. And if you look today at what the banking industry and where technology is driven, you see it's expanded hugely. I recognize that it's going to cause disruptions in the very short term. It's going to cause disruptions for individuals because there may be a net gain, but the question of who wins and who loses, the question that you rightly pointed to, that the social structuring is who's the person who's going to get those jobs. And yes, to Anand's point, I think it's going to be more those who tend to be better educated, more well off. Because when you look at automation, there will be new jobs, but they will be higher up the value chain and therefore higher up the education chain. And those who are not as well educated will probably lose jobs quicker. So that is certainly a worry. But the long-term scenario is very optimistic on that front. And, I think you'll begin to see a lot more happening in the years ahead on that particular front of saying what happens with automation and robotics and the new things that come in. The second comment I want to make is that, in just a recent study, and I was involved with some job projections, that fortunately, not necessarily by design, but partly it may be the lower wages. When you look at automation already happening in many countries and track it by sector, you find that automation is happening much faster in the comparatively higher tech sectors and lower employment sectors, the more capital intensive ones, rather than in places like textiles or leather goods, particularly India, which are the big employers. It's happening here, but far less than it's happening in, say, automobiles, where welding and painting is done by robots, even in India in the factories. So I think you'll see that gives you some sign of hope. But, to go back to some of the earlier discussions, also a very interesting sidelight I should mention to you. I was talking to one of these big garment exporters, not in India, Bangladesh, which is a very big garment exporter now. And I was asking about just this question, technology and jobs. He says some job loss, a little bit of automation for quality control and so on, but we are doing well because we are growing. And so, in fact, jobs in my factory have expanded and doing well. But he says, one place where I've had to bring in high technology which has lost jobs. And I said, what is that? And this is somewhat, I find it funny and ironical, but also sad. It's like an absurd tale from Kafka. He said, I have to use the latest laser technology to create tears in jeans. The fashion is torn jeans. So he says a brand new jeans which has a tear in it. He says, for that, very seriously, he said, for that I'm using lasers. And he says, that's the highest technology on my shop floor. What do I do?
Your comments are on what's happening and how also need to understand.
No, so, I think it's a very serious issue, the fact that jobs are getting lost on automation. My opinion on this is threefold. One is, I think the decentralization or Uberization of the economy is definitely going to happen. So people need to be self-employed and individually employed rather than trying to expect large corporations to hire you. Large corporations will not have as many jobs as people think they're going to create. So this is one thing. So everyone needs to find a way to sort of self-employ themselves. This is really critical and I think very important. And that requires you to stay up and keep technology up. The second crazy idea that I have is that we have to find a mechanism to distribute wealth across the system, but not necessarily in the same way as wages are, as the way we have seen it in the past. Because there will be wealth in the country because of the automation and other things. But that who owns that wealth is a good question and something we need to think through. And third related point, which I think may be another interesting way to look at it, is that, okay, we say robots are going to be working in the factory. Who should own the robots? Why don't we allow individuals to own my robots? So if I had a past situation where, I had my cow who gave my milk, I have my robot that goes to work, I don't. But I get the money that the robot makes. It's paying for my being happy, right? Being good at it, and I spend my day, doing things, whatever else it is, because my robot is working. So we have to figure out some different ways of how we look at, employment, Uberization and self-employment, and then its distribution of wealth. Because this expectations that factories should employ people just because they need to be inefficient is kind of not realistic anymore. I think there's lots of questions that have come up. So let me just open it out a little bit more and then we'll continue with the rest of the questions. I'll move up this way. Yeah, I have it. So maybe my recommendation would be that let's get the questions first. We'll go through the room. We'll have your comment and question and then we'll have Kiran answer them all together. Go ahead, sir.
I have two questions. First is the climate change and the increase in the Earth's temperature. There are also many people who say it is a myth. The second question is, now, see, we have gone for electric cars. We are going for electric cars. Maybe we are following the West. But if you see the overall efficiency of electric car, you put electric car in the city and that power comes from a thermal power plant located somewhere else. And if you consider the overall efficiency of it, it's really not that good. So, is anybody thinking on this? Because the options for energy generation, in India, it is more thermal because hydel is not there. Nuclear, there are so many objections. And the renewable, that will take a very long time to meet that demand. These two questions, please answer.
Hi, my name is Sachin Deshpande. I'm an entrepreneur. My question is, do we need to redefine the job roles? Because robotics and AI is going to be the future, and we have to live with it. So in terms of redefine the job roles, because so you have the better experience in terms of human and machines live together for a long, right? They are living together for decades, and jobs are getting redefined. So we have seen that major universities are redefining their curriculums so that this exists, and there are certain domains like creativity wherein human brain is required, which are not been yet replaced by machines, and both has to coexist. So my question is related to that.
Hi, my name is Amit Paranspe. Going back to the earlier discussion that you had when you talked about the Indian IT industry miracle, and 20 years back or 25 years back, or even when you took over from Devang, the $100 billion milestone would have looked crazy, right? We were probably 100th of that, and now we are approaching 200. But one thing we need to realize is, I think this has definitely helped us a lot on the export front and on the balance of payment front, because if you look at our oil situation and all the other imports, I think without the IT industry, we would have been in big trouble, right? So my question is, looking at the future, next 10 years, next 20 years, what in your view, would be the next, and adjusting for inflation and the size of the Indian economy, what could be the next $500 billion export industry for India?
This is in comparison with China specifically. And my point of view is that, clearly 10 years back, 15 years back, everybody would have said that IT in India is the clear dominant player. But if you look at the next 5 years, I think the investments that China has made in artificial intelligence and some of their technologies, if you see the leaders and the kinds of technology that is going to come out of Huawei, Baidu, Alibaba, and all of the other players, it's clearly that they have taken an advantage. So I think we have been too complacent in that context. And what would be your comment on the fact that, NASSCOM, while it's saying all kinds of things, it's really not pushed hard on the thing. So the next 10 to 15 years of the IT industry, our dominance is definitely at risk. So we'd love to get your comment on that. Let's take that question.
Anand Bapat, acupuncturist, naturopath. I may not be the right person in this field, but I'm very interested. Couple of comments. You mentioned about health and where we are going with health. But one of the things in my observation is we have a lot of chronic diseases which we don't have any cures for in terms of current Western medicine approach. So that was one. But the second part of my question, which I find in my practice a lot, is we have got technology which is being used by kids all along. And I see kids playing on their computers or tablets, thinking they are playing sport. And the fitness level has dropped tremendously poorly. And we are developing a nation of very unfit people sitting and working all the time. And we have a scare, as far as I'm concerned, of 40-year-olds retiring in big numbers because of health. But that's just my observation. Any comments on that? Thanks.
Just to add some gender balance, my question was about Mr. Anand's comment about having robots to go to work. And there's a series on Nat Geo and Discovery which talks about the combination of AI and robots, wherein we have Sophia being given the citizenship of Saudi Arabia. So maybe we'll go to that extent in some years now, where robots are given citizenships and humans are also trying to live as longer as they can, and robots and humans coexisting together will make the earth more crowded maybe. And due to this citizenship being given to robots like scenarios, not sure when that will happen, but if that happens and if there's a clash of existence between humans and robots, and the disparity that we have in technology penetration in the rural areas, how do you think this technology will balance out the prosperity existence on Earth? That's my question. Thanks.
Okay. Let me start with the last question. And, robots getting citizenship, you're right. But don't worry, we have a NRC, which will ask them to first produce ration card, proof of residence, when did you migrate, where were you born, when were you born, so not to worry. But no, more seriously, I think the two may coexist, but more likely, in my view, is not the two coexisting, maybe for a short period, but the two becoming one. As I said, and clearly it's happening to all of us already. I mean, many of us, I've got some 2 screws in my legs thanks to a motorbike. All of us already have something which is alien in us. And very soon you'll get a combination. So what is a robot and what is a human being, the so-called bionic being, is going to be difficult. And then the philosophical questions of who are you? Who am I? I mean, is it the brain that defines you? Is it your memory? Is it the physical features? What is it? So I think there are questions in the realm of philosophy which I won't get into, but that seems to be the direction where the two will probably at some point begin to converge, and who knows what might happen there.
Microbes.
Absolutely, microbes are there. Anand will know a lot more on this, and he should respond to it also. The disparities, as I said, this is a matter of the societal overall structuring, and I think we have not talked politics so far, which may be good, but I think the political domain becomes important because that will decide a lot of these issues of equity. Anand gave one example of maybe, some kind of different future where automation benefits the worker also, and the worker is displaced but not made poor. And then what will people do? You're right, as somebody mentioned, they'll become creative. They'll use their energies to, write poetry and paint maybe. That may be what the human calling for the future may be. But more on that. Let me move quickly. If I miss out anything, we can add later.
I have a list.
you got something. Dr. Bhagwat, you talked of the diseases and no cure. You're right. I think many of these are endemic. They don't have a cure in what we call Western medicine or allopathy, mainly because there's very little focus on them, because they are, or where I think they yet are substantially diseases of the poor. First the poorer countries, and among them the poorer people. So if you take TB, it's typically been in the poorer countries, and the sense is it affects the poorer more than the rich. Malaria, mainly a problem of certain countries, and so the West has devoted not much time, effort, or R&D spending in those. And since these are of deep concern to us, we should be, spending much more on researching these and see what we can do. There's some good portents, but I think we need to push hard on this. Again, it's a political economy decision. Why is our health spending so low? You can always say the other priorities which come above, defense, security, everything else. But I think it's a question worth asking, that if you are being kept secure, are you being kept secure in a state of bad health, or would you rather be in better health and, do some trade-offs there? And it's a moot question. I have no answer, nor am I taking a point of view. I'm just saying there are trade-offs, and we have chosen, unlike many other countries, to invest less in education and health than many countries at our level of income. I'm not talking of rich countries, if you take the percentage of GDP expenditure. So that's not an answer to your question, but I think it's a pointer of what could happen if we were to devote ourselves to that kind of direction. Health of children, I should mention one thing which I mentioned in my book also. The point you make is very important, and again, I look at the society-technology interaction that, and I must tell you this anecdotally. I was talking to some teachers in the school, and one of them told me something which was amazing. She said, look, I noticed the children, when they eat now, I sort of look at what they're eating, and she said, I casually look in, and I noticed the lunchbox, the traditional lunchbox the children carry to school from home, is changing. And it's changing with more ready-to-eat food, which is less healthy, less nutritious, but quick. And when you delve a little more, you find the reason is simple, and this is from some years ago. It's changed one has been replaced by the other, but earlier it used to be television. And very understandably, the parents, particularly the mother in the household who has taken on the responsibility or been given the responsibility of looking after the kitchen, so to say, the cooking dimension, the only time she is free is after dinner. And so very often she is watching TV late night. And then the temptation next day morning, not every day, but some days of the week, is to give some quick, ready-made, easy-to-eat food, which is just put in the dabba. And she said that she was telling the teacher that, I'm worried this will affect the health of children. So just the point you're making in a different way. But I think there are these things. And children themselves, you're right, don't spend as much time, not only not playing, but interacting with other children. It's become minimal. They are machine and one person. And I think that's, to me, not healthy, but who knows, that may be the new social dimension which is coming about. So there are certainly these changes, which is what I mentioned in my chapter on attitude, behavior, and culture, how these are changing. How culture is changing, how sports is yet there, but it's fewer people. Even when there's sport, it's more spectators than active players. And a lot of it is sport on the machine, which is games. So certainly changes out there.
Yeah, the question of the $1 trillion.
Yeah, the next $1 trillion, I think, I wish I knew, then I would invest in that. And if I'd invested in Anand's company 20 years back, I might be a rich man today. But I didn't, and I think here also I don't know. But all I can say is that there are new prospects which seem very promising. And what you've got to see is to marry what the possibilities of new technologies are and see what the intersection of the three sets are. The new technologies, the big markets, because you're talking now of $1 trillion, you're talking of money, so hard cash. Where are the big markets? Where is the technology? And where are our capabilities? And the intersection of these three sets will tell you where we should be. No answers easily, but I think that's what it is. But let me answer it in a different way. Not knowing what will work best. Often governments think they know it all, and they say, this is where we want to invest money. I think it's a mistake. We don't know, frankly, what will come up. And as you rightly pointed out, who knew the IT industry is going to be big as it has become? We had dreams, those of us who were in IT, Anand included, and we projected something which most people thought is crazy. They said, you're mad, you've got a zero extra there. Or they said, it's not dollars. It's fine what you've done, but it's not dollars, it's rupees. So 1/50th or whatever. But I think those dreams have by and large come true. But most people thought it wasn't realistic. And today we don't know what technology will work. So the best thing that we can do in terms of policy or as a country is to create a fertile environment in which ideas that are bright and good come up, many of them. And you can be sure 90% of them will fail. And anybody who's in the startup business or venture capital, angel funding business will tell you this, that 8 out of 10 startups will definitely fail, you can be assured. 2 of them will do well. Of those 2, 1 may do so well that it makes up for all those you lost and much more. And that's the philosophy. So you have a wider portfolio, but you encourage this thousands flower bloom thing. And that's something which, as a country, I think we are yet to really learn. We tend to pick favorites and then back them and say we are doing this. And I think, while in the short term there may be justification for that in orientation to a particular thing, in the longer term, what we've got to do is to make sure we have just the fertile ground on which anything may grow. Many of them will be weeds, but some will turn out to be brilliant and give you fruits for many years to come, and you can harvest them. My speculation will be that for India, the next $1 trillion industry is likely to be a combination of our big strength, which is software, and continues to be a strength, though many people doubt it. And yeah, we talk of China separately, and a very, very interesting and good discussion on that. But it's yet our strength, software, and marry that to some strong emerging area. And I would put my personal bets on biology in the broadest sense, and some combination of these two, I think, is going to be there. On jobs, there was something about jobs and creativity and job roles. Yeah, and absolutely, I think job roles, you're right, are going to change completely. And I tell young people, there are not too many of them here today, that look, one thing you can be absolutely sure of, that all that you've learned in your graduation, within 5 years, will be useless. It will be obsolete. And you will be obsolete and you lose your job. Not only because you don't know the latest, but because that job will cease to exist. It will just disappear in 5 or 10 years. So you got to reinvent what you are. That means lifelong learning. It's an old cliche from many years ago, but it means lifelong learning. More importantly, it means the ability to learn new things quickly. Today there are lots of things online. You can pick courses on what you want. Somebody's giving a course on something new all the time. But your ability to grasp those and spend time on those and devote yourself to learning new things is going to be critical, because that's going to be the future. The other part, and I refer back to creativity, is for human beings, is innovation. Because, despite all the artificial intelligence which will one day think like the brain maybe, for the next decade or so, these leaps of imagination, the sudden intuitive idea, will yet, I think, come only from the human mind. Once that idea is there, you can use artificial intelligence, data analytics, everything you want to take that further. But the initial thing will come from the human mind. And so innovation is going to be key as you move forward, and that will create new jobs, new job roles, new things to come.
And then climate change.
Climate change, yeah. Well, I know there are a few people. I don't think any scientist, or maybe 99% of the scientists, buy that climate change is here. And we all see its manifestations in terms of extreme climate events. Sudden floods, extreme droughts, heavy downpours in a space of a few hours, all kinds of climate change things. And I think that more serious scientists, at least the overwhelming majority of opinion, is that climate change is happening and global warming is happening, not something to be wished away with. The overall efficiency and electric cars, yeah, it's something that needs calculation and working. But clearly we are heading for very strong renewables and low emission thermal plants. You're right, in India as in China, for many, many years yet, thermal and coal-based thermal, not even oil or gas, is going to be our mainstay. So we're going to continue to be big polluters. But even electric car technology is evolving with batteries that can be charged quicker, more efficiently, solar panels that are more efficient. And who knows, maybe the hydrogen will come up to power cars. And it's yet tough because of storage and, problems of safety. But that may be the new thing that will come up. And, the dream of having less ownership individual and more shared ownership, where the Ubers and Olas are good examples, may be good because it optimizes. You don't need so many cars on the road. Each car runs more, so there is some pollution, but you don't have that many cars. You have less congestion, less possibilities of traffic, and less accidents, hopefully. So I think that may be the future direction. I may have missed some, Anand, but you can add to that.
I think you got all the questions out of that. I think there are more questions here, so we'll get the mic around. But I want to sort of ask you a slightly different question before we get to the other ones. So one is about fake news, all the other things that's going on, technology introducing stuff, elections getting compromised in the US, and I'm not sure what's going to happen here. But what's your thought on what's happening, state-sponsored terrorism, defense changing from fighting to electronics and various other things, and how well are we prepared for all this stuff, and what should we be doing in that area?
Just one, yeah. One brief comment on the broader aspect, Anand, which you talked of fake news and so on. And I was one of those, and yes, again, going back to what Pradeep said, I was an optimist and yet continue to be in some ways. But on this part, I've become somewhat more pessimistic, which is social media. When social media first came about, I thought, fantastic, one more way like the internet in which anybody who has a point of view can put it out to many people. So you get lots of different points of view floating around in cyberspace, being discussed, being debated, being challenged, new points of view that come. But that's not happened. What's ended up is that all these social media have ended up in closed user groups, which have become echo chambers, where the negatives get amplified because they have faster currency, and you get groups that continue to build stereotypes and make them worse and worse. And everywhere it's the other who's made the devil. So I think there are serious concerns on where it's going. And with fake news and rumors, it's become worse because it's not just something unintentional which is put out, but there's intentional stimuli provided to some groups to create a bigger sort of ruckus on it. And we have seen some terrible things with rumors. Just reading, and I've quoted that, lynching for a kidnap, which actually never happened. The 4 young IT professionals from Bangalore visiting a friend's relative in a village, and there's rumors going around about children being kidnapped and some 4 young people doing it. And this went round and made the viral circuit. And somebody saw these 4 people driving, assumed they were the guys, stopped them, and there was argument, they got beaten up, one of them got killed. Terrible sort of thing. So I think there are dangers of that nature in terms of where it's going and what's happening there. You were asking also on social media's state-sponsored, yeah, you're asking on the broader aspect of it. I think this is a deep concern. It's first groups of hackers who are doing it just for fun, then those groups who get more professional and do it for money, or so-called ransomware, and demand extortive things. And then you have state-sponsored, state-supported, organized groups that do this as a new method of creating problems for your enemy, and it might end up with some kind of cyber war. The only good thing about cyber war is hopefully less people will get killed, but you never know, Some of the cyber attacks can cause tremendous amount of human destruction. And there are serious worries there because it's not that difficult to do despite all the protection. It's a continuous battle between those who are trying to, beat you and the system which is defensive. And as people keep saying who fight these defensive battles, there may be many here from that kind of services background who know this, the defender has to succeed 100% of the time. The offender has to succeed only once. That's it. So I think that odds are tilted very unfavorably for defenders. And therefore, worse, many countries themselves take on this thing saying it's no point just defending, we should have offensive capability. And then when and how that is used becomes somewhat open-ended. So there are deep concerns there, ranging from hacking and cyber, hacking in for monetary reasons to bigger problems of security.
Yeah. Kiran, I would be interested in your thoughts on something that I think is still quite a gray area. On the one side, we see that there are disruptive technologies which have the potential to do a lot of good, but also there are some dangers, some concerns, etc. On the other side, then, you need somebody to monitor, to say that, there have to be guidelines, you can't cross the line beyond this. For instance, on genetic babies, there are some rules now on how far a scientist can go, when or not at all. Similarly, in data as well, privacy, the Europeans came up with a certain code on things. In your experience, who do you think is best positioned to play that monitor role on what is the equity implication, what is the safety implication of whatever these disruptive technologies bring? So far, traditionally, it's been the government, but government is not well placed to really understand new technologies. That's one problem. Then there are governments and governments, so that's another problem. Internationally, the UN bodies have not shown any capacity to take the lead in this. Have you found that professional bodies, or who should be doing this ethical watchdog role in your idea? Who can we rely on to do the right thing by humankind? If there's no answer, you can just say there's no answer.
Absolutely. But exactly, well said. Answer, none, frankly. But a viewpoint, I think it raises a broader viewpoint because our governance structures globally are completely obsolete. I talked of obsolescence, completely obsolete. Form of government today is meaningless. We all practice it. We shout our country. What is your country? I mean, is it territorial? Is it human beings? Is it minds? Is it thoughts? What is it? Because today things are flowing across those borders freely. Not just financial data, but all kinds of things are going up and down. So what is a country? And the government, what does the government represent? Yeah, in a democracy, they represent the will of the people. But whose will? Is it just a majority will? That doesn't sound nice to most of us. That just a majority, just because somebody got 30% or 25% vote in an election which had multi-party, does that give them the right to decide for the country? So it's very tricky. The moot point you're asking makes it trickier because now you're talking of something which is global. And as you rightly said, there are governments and governments, of all kinds and complexions. The UN, you're right, has not worked in almost any field, barring where the big paws wanted it to. There have been more technical organizations that have been a little more successful, like the ITU, the WTO till recently, till Mr. Trump decided to put paid to it. But there are some examples. But the newer model, which is yet evolving because there's no proper structure to it, is the so-called multi-stakeholder model, which has governments, industry, and civil society, very importantly. And in the internet area, there are a few structures of this kind being created, which are the so-called multi-stakeholder model, which incorporate all three of these dimensions. So civil society is represented to reflect broader social concerns. Industry is represented because it drives a lot of work and drives the markets, and the government because hopefully they're taking care of the broader aspect of people and security and so on. That may be the only one. But yes, the fact that we need something soon is critical. But who will regulate, how will they decide, is very tricky. So I think this may be one thought.
Yeah. Two more questions, and then I want to conclude because I'm also watching the time. So go ahead, sir.
My question is being optimistic when we say that people say that a lot of current job roles will disappear and the new job roles will be there. But how do you foresee that these new job roles which maybe come up in future will be worth paying jobs? Or everybody is just maintaining the robots, or just everybody cannot be data analyst or business analyst. So how do you foresee from that? Will those be worth paying jobs?
Okay, let's take one more. Okay, let's take one question from you.
Certainly, when we look at the technology, it has done the wonder. And the other day also we had talk on the leapfrogging to the pole vaulting, certainly, when it comes to the, taking our country to the next step. But the question is really, at what cost? And trying to be a little more philosophical, what happens to the nature and natural phenomena? You just mentioned element, certainly on the lighter tone, take the industry to the space, the damaging and all that. And the other day, we had a talk from Dr. Pramod Kale, the tons of debris which is moving around our Earth. And we still have not modeled, not simulated. We are talking about the environment concern, the global warming on the Earth, but we have not understood the universe on a future date. So certainly when we talk about a misuse, probably a misuse is possible, but not the abuse. And that coming back really, today what we are looking into we as a human being, one part is the creativity, but whether will that happen in? Today every child look into the Google Baba, as if really, the brain is becoming a dumb, sitting on the shoulders, and the same really, the human touch, the emotions, where they do have a place really, as today we see the advances with the technology.
Yeah, and let's take that last question there at the last one, and I want to, actually I'm watching the clock here, sorry please.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for giving this opportunity. The word disruptive tech story or disruptive technology is generally used in positive sense when we talk about disruption. But what about the negative aspects it is bringing? You have IIT, IIM graduates on streets, onboarding hotels and restaurants for a salary of probably CEO of a small scale industry. and customers who don't probably need those products, or maybe getting those products at a cheaper price in the beginning, so they get habitual to it, and then at the end they can't probably afford it. People who are selling those products are thinking of it as aggregator in the beginning. At the end, now you speak to any Ola or Uber driver, they are regretting probably working with Ola and Uber, because they were paid excessively with investors' money, and now those kind of money involved is not sustainable. So is this disruption really in positive sense, or it is just degrading the professionals, the consumers, and the businessmen themselves?
Anyway, can you be brief?
Yeah, very, very briefly. Last question first. Yes, there is a lot of misuse, and investor money is being used to give big discounts, attract people, get them used to a certain thing. This is what business has traditionally done for years, for centuries. Earlier it used to be through advertising, or through building role models. The famous Marlboro Man, some of you would remember, which got you attracted to smoking. So it can be all kinds of things, and yes, there are dangers, but I think human beings are smart enough, and some people fall for it, some don't. The models correct themselves. And there are issues, Uber, Ola, you mentioned, there are issues with giving them too much money first and suddenly feeling let down. But on the, not the other side, but let me say in terms of jobs and roles also, partly in response to the second question, they're creating new roles, not necessarily at the top of the chain, not necessarily PhDs, which are there. Look at food delivery. I was just reading the figures for Swiggy, which is, 2-3 years old. They now employ 120,000 people for delivery. Now, those are not regular jobs. I don't think they get a PF or ESI, but they are jobs, and they are reasonably well paid, and lots of people prefer taking them and work with them. They're quite happy getting the money they get. Now, this is evolving, and one thing we might have to get used to in future is no permanent jobs, no permanent social security. And that's difficult, but social security may have to come from the state, not from your employer. Some other way of looking at it. But there are these jobs that are being generated, and not all of them are necessarily sophisticated jobs which require AI or data science degrees. Some of them are at ground level, so I think the possibility is there. The fact that there's misuse of technology, and you talk to the universe, is known and high. That continues, and sometimes the depressing thought, if you want, is that despite all this technological progress, how much has the human being evolved? We yet kill each other, which we did, centuries, millennia ago. What's different? Only thing, we have more technology to do it, so you can do it remotely. Earlier you had to be face to face, now you can do it from far away. So you feel maybe less responsible. It's like playing a game. You sit somewhere in some place, anywhere in the world. Just the US is an example. You control a drone and drop a bomb somewhere. You don't even know who, what, it's all on your screen somewhere. It's like playing a video game. So who knows, that kind of human touch being lost and what it might mean for the universe is worrisome. And where it might go, you really don't know. So, very often people nowadays, in our country particularly, we have a lot of things on smart cities. So I sometimes wish we had smart human beings, but there's no project for that yet. So one day it will happen.
So clearly, by looking at all the questions that are here, this has been a very engaging session. I'm going to not take any more questions because I think it's near 7, and I'm going to take this opportunity to very quickly summarize what we heard today and close this event and hand it to Sangeeta for vote of thanks. So first, thanks a lot, Kiran, for being here, writing the book and stimulating a very good discussion here. I think we spent a good amount of time thinking about various technologies that will have an impact in the country. Clearly, many of these are going to have far-reaching impact in terms of education, healthcare, agriculture, and many other areas where I think unless we leverage technology, the opportunities that we have and the size of the country that we have, we really don't have enough time to go one at a time. So we have to take advantage of technology to make the leapfrogging or some of the areas that people have mentioned. So some of your thoughts on this, I think, are really worth thinking about. I think you also stimulated a very good discussion on the challenges that you have. So every time you get a rope, you can do many things with it, including hang yourselves. But at least you should know that that can happen. So it's sometimes good to think about some of these things and reflect on them to see how one can be conscious about the advantages and disadvantages of technology and how we can collectively as a group be smart about using some of these things. And I think some of your points on that came from the audience and also what you pointed out were, I think, worth thinking about. So I thought it was a very good discussion from that point as well. Clearly, there is a lot for us to do. I think we are in the midst of a transition point for us as a country. I think many of the issues that people thought of, which have been issues that you pointed out 20, 30 years back, are very different for the next 20 years. I think we will have a set of things which, in terms of population, wealth, technology, that we can take for granted. How we put it to use will depend a lot on some of the points that you mentioned regarding governments, policies, and how we treat our own future in destiny in some sense. So I think it's been a very stimulating and an interesting conversation. I know Kiran is pretty prompt at responding to emails, so if you feel like writing something to him, please send him email. And I'm going to conclude this by handing it to Sangeeta and thanking PIC for inviting me for this session. It's been a really good activity for me first to read parts of the book and then to be part of this discussion. Thank you, Kiran.
So let me first thank both Dr. Anand Deshpande and Mr. Kiran Karnik for coming here and really involving a very good discussion for all of us. To just sum up this particular session in terms of the vertical named as Crazy About Science and Technology, I'll quickly summarize one or two things. So the important things that both of them told us is self-employed. I'm talking in terms of students now. So it's very important to have ourselves to be self-employed rather than actually looking for an employer and trying to do a job for somebody. The next technology which will be ruling in India would be a combination of software and biology, genetics, DNA engineering, and so on. So this is something that these are the take-home things for the students who are there in the audience. Then the job role will be completely modified as time goes ahead. So the concept of graduation needs to really be revamped. This is in terms of education reforms. And innovation is the key. So this is something I've actually read the book already, and this book really talks about all these aspects. So these are the take-home messages for the students especially. So on behalf of PIC, I thank both of you that you could come here. So we wish you a very good luck for the book, and for the students and the audience here, there's a stall kept outside. You're free to take the book from there. Please buy the book. There is a stall outside. And on behalf of PIC, I would like to request Dr. Anand to give a token of appreciation to Mr. Kiran Karnik. Okay.